Hola. Okay, so I'm doing this. I'm just gonna talk about 5 books that I read this month. Some of them I liked more than others, but I'm just gonna give you a little tour of what I've been reading. For those of you who need like suggestions or want to hear about a book before you just blindly try it. So, some of these books I picked up from my classroom, and I know that some of my students were reading them, so it was kind of fun to read what they were reading or what they already read and figure out what you guys like. Okay, so first one that I read, I'm actually going to say this one was my favorite one I read this month. I actually don't have the book anymore because it was so good, I gave it to my sister. I was like, you have to read this. So here's a picture of the cover. It looks like this. Oh. It's also backwards probably, but What I Leave Behind by Alison McGee. I bought this book in my book order a while ago when we were still at school, and I had no idea really what it was about. I actually picked it because the cover looked cool, and then when I brought it to school, Deuce picked it up and was like, I'm reading this because it's short. And eventually, once he finished it, he told me, this book is actually so good, not just because it's short. And so I was like, okay, and then I ended up reading it this month. So What I Leave Behind is a short book, yes. It is, every chapter is only 100 words, so 1 page long, less than a page long. So it's written kind of artistically like that, but it's about a kid named Will, and he walks every single day, and it's his way of like processing things or getting through stuff. He's like, I just gotta walk it out. And I think the reason I like this book so much is because it's, how do I explain it? It's really funny, and witty. It made me laugh out loud sometimes, but it covers topics that are real, so that would be something to know before reading it. But Will doesn't have a dad anymore. His dad committed suicide a while ago, and so that's part of the reason he walks so much, is that's one of the biggest things he's working through in the story, and then a bunch of other things that he just explains to you as you keep reading the story. But he's such a good kid. He's like, you want to be his friend when you read the book. It's so perfect. I'm not very good at explaining these. You guys know how I explain books in class, and you know I get kind of just giddy and maybe not the most articulate, but I would definitely say this should be on your list. It is so good. It made my heart feel good at the end of the book, and it only took me a day to read, obviously, because it's really short. So, would recommend. Okay, that was number 1. Number 2, sorry, my stack is what's holding up my phone, is this one, Look Both Ways by Jason Reynolds. I heard this is a good book, and it's just came out recently, plus it had an award. National Book Award finalist. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll read it. Also, doesn't hurt that it's pretty short. It's only 188 pages. This book was really good. It is a story told in 10 blocks, is what it says on here, or a tale told in 10 blocks, and every chapter is told from a different point of view, but by the end of the book, all the characters kind of relate to each other in some way. So even though they think that their lives are so different because they're their own people and they have their own things going on, you as the reader start noticing how everything kind of matches up. How they go to the same school, and how one person's life affects another, and how they all kind of need each other to survive as a community. But this is a really good book. I also read this one in a day. So, short books, that's just the way it goes sometimes. This author, usually anything is good by Jason Reynolds, so you cannot go wrong with this book. Go for it. Alright, here we go. Next up, which one do I want to do? I'm gonna do, sorry everyone. Okay, it's fine. Alright. I'm going to go with, okay. And we're back. Oh my gosh. Fail. Okay. Next one, I kind of mentioned this in one of my other YouTube videos, but I didn't talk about it. This book is called Dear Evan Hansen. Actually, this is a musical. Dear Evan Hansen is a Broadway musical, and then it also got made into a book because the musical is really, really popular. It's been on my list of things I want to see for forever, but I've never gotten to go to a Broadway musical, sadly. So I finally was like, you know what, I'm just going to read this book, the novel version of it, so I get a feel for what it's about. And I'm really glad I did. This one is about this kid named Evan Hansen, and he struggles a little bit. He's I can't remember which year, freshman or sophomore in high school? Anyway, and in order to deal with things in life, he writes letters to himself. So it always starts a letter with Dear Evan Hansen, and talks about what he's thinking about, and then he ends up talking about whatever he writes in the letter with his therapist. So they do that like once a week. So he writes these letters to himself, and then eventually he writes one, and it's really negative. He's writing about how his life kind of sucks in this letter. And someone finds the letter, and after someone finds his letter, things go kind of out of control. And someone at his school passes away. And then everything gets crazy. This book also deals with some mature topics, but the message is amazing. I'm not going to give away too much because I feel like sometimes some books it's better if you don't know exactly everything that's going to happen. But this book was really good, and I might have cried because I always cry, but it's fine. It made me want to see the musical even more, so I'm really excited about that. And if you read this, let me know if you liked it. I feel so weird doing this. Okay. Look at me. Okay. Linus, come. Come here. This always happens. Come here. Linus. Good. Good boy. Okay, 2 more to go. Oh my gosh. Okay. I just tripped. Okay. Trying to cut some things out. Okay, 2 more to go. This one, The Cheerleaders by Kara Thomas. Linus, good. I was never planning on reading this book, but when I went back to the classroom to get some of my stuff, I knew how much some of my students said they loved it. Izzy for one, and who else? Someone else was reading this book and they loved it. But this is a mystery book. Okay, so definitely not my usual. I usually go for feelsy books, but this one's different. It's a mystery book, and it definitely has some really crazy twists in it, which I'm not even used to, like, oh, what are the twists? Blah, blah, blah. But I actually got into this mystery book. So, wow, I am so bad at this. I'm so sorry if you made it this far. Okay, main character is, I read this one a couple weeks ago, so it's a little fuzzy, but, Monica. Monica is a freshman, I believe, freshman in high school, and in her town, all of the cheerleaders 5 years ago ended up, well, not all of them, a whole bunch of cheerleaders on their squad ended up dying in like a few weeks. And some of the murders were not solved, or they were solved, but too easily. Like, clearly they weren't really solved, something was still going on, and it was basically unsolved a little bit. And Monica's sister was one of the cheerleaders who passed away during this time 5 years ago. So she's always kind of haunted by it. And basically, she starts out the story kind of in a bad place at the beginning of her freshman year, and then some things start coming up near the anniversary of her sister's death, and she starts to dig a little bit, and the more she digs, the more people don't want to talk to her about stuff that's happened. So I won't explain because it gets really insane, but this includes her having a fling with a guy in the summer, and then later in the school year he ends up being a coach at their school, and some other like crazy stuff like that. So it's definitely like feels like I'm watching a dramatic mystery show on Netflix. That's kind of the vibes it gave me. Yeah, really good though. Come take that from someone who doesn't read mysteries very much. Okay, one more. Here we go. Whoop. Let's see if my phone won't fall this time. Nope, that's just impossible. Okay, last one. Some of you helped me decide that I was going to read this one. I was like, what should my last book be? And I gave you 3 choices. And then a few people reached out to me and were like, you should read this one. It's The Field Guide to the North American Teenager. So this one, I've been told by a few people it's really good. And when I've researched it, it's pretty good in the reviews. And then also, right before we got out of school, Leo was reading this too. And he was like, I'm actually reading this book because it's really, really funny. And it has cuss words in it. And I was like, oh, good. Great. But this book was very funny. I started reading it on here, and then I ended up wanting to do some, like, crafts and stuff, so I got the audiobook so I could listen while I was doing stuff. And both the audiobook and the actual book were really easy and fun to read. This is about a kid named Norris who hates his name. He thinks it's super lame and weird, and he's from Canada. So he's an African-American kid, born in Haiti, but lived in Canada most of his life. So, and then the book starts out with him having to move to Texas. So he's lived all his life mostly in Texas. Oh my gosh, I'm so messing this up. He's lived most of his life in Canada, and he finally, in the beginning of the book, moves to Texas as a sophomore, I think. And so he moves to Texas, and Texas is insanely different than Canada, and he really struggles to fit in. And so the reason it's called like the Field Guide to the North American Teenager is when he gets to this new school in Texas, this lady's like, oh, so you're from Canada, you must speak French, and she tries to like be like, oh, let me help you fit in, and he's like, I already speak English and French, and she gives him this little notebook, and she's like, well, in case you need this to really start taking notes and feeling better about this new move to Texas, I'm gonna give you this notebook, and you can write down stuff in it. And he's like, whatever, he's not gonna use this, but then he ends up writing in the journal, and he calls it his field guide, and he basically writes down like descriptions of stereotypes in his high school. So like typical football players, typical cheerleaders, typical loners, typical chemistry teachers. Like, he writes a description of them, and this book, if you hear nothing else, is perfect for you if you read sarcasm. Like, you love sarcasm, you are sarcastic, or sarcasm makes you laugh. Because this is literally just full of sarcasm. The main character, Norris, has a really witty sense of humor, and he's constantly throwing comebacks at people, and, yeah. So, that does end up getting him in trouble later in the book, but all of it just makes for a really funny, sweet story. I thought it was just going to be a funny story as I was reading until I got to about, like, here, And then I was like, oh, this isn't just like a big joke, like it also touches on, like, he becomes really good friends with this one character, and it was actually a deep moment that I was like, oh, I love this. It's not just a big, like, sarcastic book full of teenage jokes. Like, it got really good right about 3/4 of the way through, like, in that way. So, and then it ends really awesome, even though you're not sure it will. So, I say read this book. It was a good one. Okay. I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions about these books, reach out to me. You can email me, comment, like, subscribe. I'm just kidding. But I'm only doing this because so many of you are like, please write about books or do a video on books. And so I decided to try to do 5 in 1. I failed miserably, I'm sure, but I hope this helped for any of you who are looking for a book. If you're my student, I miss you so much. I just don't even know how to talk about it anymore. All I'm gonna say is I better see you before you head off to your freshman year. Please. Okay. I go now. Bye.